The grand halls of the Galactic Science Academy echoed with laughter as Lisa walked past groups of alien students. Her small metal cylinder, carefully wrapped in worn cloth, drew sneers and whispers from her classmates. The young human woman kept her head high, though her cheeks burned with embarrassment. "Look at the primitive playing with metal tubes again," a blue-skinned student called out, his crystalline eyes glinting with mockery. "Trying to recreate ancient weapons from her species' entertainment shows." Lisa clutched her project closer. 3 years at the academy had taught her to ignore such taunts, but today felt different. After countless nights of research, failed attempts, and secret experiments, she had finally done it. The device in her hands wasn't just a toy or a prop, it was real, and it worked. The Academy's main workshop was nearly empty when she arrived. Perfect. Lisa preferred it this way, away from the judging eyes of others. She set up her equipment at her usual workstation in the corner, spreading out her tools and diagnostic devices with practiced precision. Still wasting resources on that human fantasy project? Professor Wells appeared behind her, his mechanical eyes whirring as they focused on her work. Unlike the other teachers who dismissed her ideas outright, Wells had always shown a hint of curiosity about her research. "It's not fantasy anymore, Professor," Lisa replied quietly, unwrapping the metal cylinder. "I've solved the crystal alignment issue. The containment field holds stable now." The professor's expression shifted between doubt and interest. The energy requirements alone would make such a device impossible with current technology. Even if you could generate enough power, the heat would. Lisa's thumb found the activation switch. A brilliant beam of pure energy erupted from the cylinder with a distinctive hum that made every head in the workshop turn. The blade of light cast a blue glow across the stunned faces of nearby students who had gathered to watch another expected failure. Professor Wells stepped back, his mechanical eyes dilating rapidly. "Impossible," he whispered. "You've actually done it." The blade hummed steadily as Lisa moved it in a careful arc, demonstrating its stability. The energy readings on nearby monitors showed consistent power levels, no fluctuations, no dangerous spikes. Years of studying ancient Earth entertainment had led her to this moment, but she had gone beyond mere imitation. She had created something new, something that combined human imagination with advanced alien science. "The power source?" Wells asked, his voice now filled with professional curiosity rather than dismissal. "A modified quantum core, using principles from both human theoretical physics and galactic standard power systems," Lisa explained, her confidence growing with each word. "The containment field is generated by a network of microcrystals I grew myself, arranged in a recursive pattern that..." A loud alarm cut through the workshop's quiet atmosphere. Red warning lights began flashing along the corridors outside. The Academy's emergency broadcast system crackled to life. "Security breach in Sector 7. Unknown hostile entities have breached the outer defenses. All students and faculty proceed to designated shelter areas immediately." Lisa's hand tightened around her invention's handle. As screams and running footsteps filled the halls outside, she realized that her toy was about to face its first real test. The very people who had laughed at her were about to learn just how wrong they had been about human innovation. Chaos erupted in the Academy's corridors as students and faculty rushed toward the shelter areas. Lisa stood her ground in the workshop, her energy blade humming with steady power while Professor Wells urged nearby students toward the exits. "Lisa, you need to evacuate with the others," Wells insisted, his mechanical eyes scanning multiple emergency feeds at once. "The security forces will handle this." A crash echoed from somewhere nearby, followed by the distinctive sound of plasma weapons fire. Lisa's grip tightened on her weapon. "The security forces are 3 levels down, Professor. Whatever breached Sector 7 will reach us before they do." As if confirming her words, the workshop's reinforced doors buckled inward. Through the warped metal, Lisa caught glimpses of hulking figures in dark armor. Raiders. The Academy's vast collection of advanced technology had always made it a tempting target for the galaxy's criminal elements. "Get everyone out through the back," Lisa told Wells, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'll hold them here." "That's insane," Wells protested. "That device is untested in combat. You can't." The doors exploded inward. 3 raiders stormed through the smoke, their armor covered in jutting spikes and their helmets featuring intimidating insectoid designs. Each carried heavy plasma rifles that could reduce a person to atoms in seconds. "Nobody moves," the lead raider growled through his helmet's voice modulator. "This is now property of the—" He stopped mid-sentence, staring at the blade of pure energy in Lisa's hands. A moment of silence passed before all 3 raiders burst into laughter. "Look boys, the humans got a toy." The leader's laughter wheezed through his modulator. "What's next? You'll show us your plastic space gun?" Lisa didn't respond. Instead, she recalled her countless hours practicing with training robots in secret. The raiders' armor looked tough, but she knew exactly where the weak points would be. Their joints, their helmet seals, their weapon power cells, all standard vulnerable spots. The first raider raised his rifle, still chuckling. "All right, playtime's over. Drop the glow stick and—" Lisa moved. Her blade swept upward in a precise arc, cleaving through the raider's rifle like it was made of paper. The weapon's severed halves clattered to the floor, their power cells safely disconnected by her calculated strike. The raider stumbled backward, his laughter replaced by shocked silence. "What the—" The second raider opened fire, but Lisa was already moving. Her blade spun in a defensive pattern she had practiced thousands of times, catching and deflecting the plasma bolts. Each shot bounced harmlessly away, leaving scorch marks on the workshop's walls. The third raider tried to flank her, but Lisa had anticipated this. She thrust her free hand forward, throwing one of her spare power cells at his feet. The small device erupted in a targeted electromagnetic pulse, shorting out his armor systems and leaving him frozen in place. "Fall back," the lead raider shouted, but Lisa wasn't finished. Her blade danced through the air, slicing through their remaining weapons with surgical precision. Within seconds, all 3 raiders stood disarmed, their expensive gear reduced to smoking scrap. Professor Wells and the remaining students watched in awe as Lisa held her blade at ready, its hum now carrying a different meaning to everyone in the room. This was no toy. This was a revolution in defensive technology, created by a human who had dared to dream beyond the galaxy's assumptions. "The security forces will be here in 2 minutes, Lisa announced calmly, keeping her blade trained on the raiders. "I suggest you surrender quietly." The raiders raised their hands, their earlier mockery replaced by a newfound respect and fear for the human they had underestimated. In the distance, the sound of approaching security teams echoed through the corridors, but the real threat had already been neutralized. By a human. With a toy. News of the workshop incident spread through the academy like wildfire. Within hours, every screen in the facility showed security footage of Lisa defending against the raiders. The same students who had mocked her toy now watched in stunned silence as recordings showed her blade deflecting plasma bolts and cutting through advanced weapons with ease. In the academy's main conference room, Lisa sat before the board of directors. Her weapon lay on the table between them, drawing curious glances from the assembled aliens and humans. The academy's head director, an elderly human named Thomas, leaned forward in his chair. "Miss Lisa," he began, his voice carrying across the silent room, "your actions today saved lives and protected millions worth of academy property. However, you've also created an unregistered weapon of remarkable power without oversight or approval." Lisa met his gaze steadily. "With respect, Director, every attempt I made to get official approval was rejected. I was told my project was fantasy and a waste of resources. I had to work in secret because no one would listen. A tall, mantis-like alien director clicked his mandibles in irritation. Because it should have been impossible. The energy requirements alone are handled by my quantum core design, Lisa interrupted, reaching for her weapon. Several directors flinched, but she simply opened a panel on the handle. I can show you the schematics. I solved the power problem by combining human theoretical models with galactic standard technologies. The containment field uses principles that. That's exactly why we're concerned, Thomas cut in. You've created something unprecedented. Something that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. The raiders today weren't random criminals, they were hired by someone who learned about your project. Someone powerful. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. How did they? We've had a security breach, Thomas explained. Someone's been monitoring your private research logs. When your power readings spiked last week, they knew you'd succeeded. That's why they sent the raiders. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Lisa's invention wasn't just a breakthrough, it was a target. And so was she. The Academy cannot protect you forever, the Mantis director stated. Already, we're receiving inquiries from military organizations, private security firms, and weapons manufacturers. They all want what you've created. Lisa stood up, her voice firm. Then let them come. I didn't create this weapon for profit or power. I made it because everyone said it couldn't be done. Because sometimes the impossible just needs someone stubborn enough to try. Thomas smiled slightly. And that's exactly why we're offering you a full professorship. The other directors muttered in surprise, but Thomas raised a hand for silence. You'll have your own research lab, full funding, and a team of assistants. In return, you'll develop your technology exclusively for the Academy. We'll ensure it's used responsibly, for defense rather than conquest. Lisa blinked in surprise. But I'm still a student. I haven't even finished my. You've already taught us more about innovation than we could ever teach you, Thomas replied. The galaxy needs to remember that impossible is just another word for, hasn't been done yet. Who better to teach that lesson than you? The Mantis director chittered thoughtfully. Perhaps we have been too dismissive of human ideas. Your entertainment media, which we dismissed as mere fantasy, clearly inspired genuine innovation. Lisa picked up her weapon, feeling its familiar weight. Fantasy is just science we haven't figured out yet. Humans have always known that. Maybe it's time the rest of the galaxy learned it too. As she left the conference room, Lisa smiled. The weapon at her side was no longer a source of mockery, it was proof that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their resources. It was their ability to dream of impossible things, and then find ways to make them real. But in the shadows of the Academy's corridors, hidden cameras tracked her movement. Somewhere in the galaxy, powerful forces were already plotting. Lisa's victory today wasn't an end, it was just the beginning of a much bigger battle. Lisa's new laboratory buzzed with activity. 3 weeks after the raider attack, she had transformed the space into a center for advanced energy weapon research. Holographic displays showed detailed schematics of her invention, while testing chambers hummed with experimental power cores. The latest test results are impressive, her assistant Jack reported, checking data readings. A former skeptic of her work, he had become one of her most dedicated supporters. The modified containment field is holding steady at 150% of the original power output. Lisa nodded, making adjustments to a new prototype on her workbench. This version was sleeker, with improved safety features and power efficiency. Good. We'll need that extra power for the defensive applications we discussed. The Academy had been true to its word, providing her with everything she needed to develop her technology. But they had also increased security significantly. Armed guards patrolled the corridors outside, and energy shields protected every entrance to the lab. They had good reason to be cautious. In the weeks since her invention became public, there had been 12 attempted break-ins at the academy. 3 different criminal organizations had tried to bribe her staff. Even some governments had made veiled threats, demanding she share her research. "Professor," Jack called out, his voice tense. "You need to see this." Lisa walked to his monitoring station. On the screen, a news report showed smoking ruins that had once been the Central Research Institute on Mars. The reporter's voice was grim: "Fourth attack this month on major research facilities." While no group has claimed responsibility, sources suggest these attacks are linked to recent technological breakthroughs at the Galactic Science Academy. "They're targeting anyone who might be able to replicate my work," Lisa said quietly. "Trying to ensure they're the only ones who get their hands on it." "But who are they?" Jack asked. Before Lisa could answer, the lab's lights flickered. The power readings on nearby monitors spiked erratically. "That's not possible," Lisa muttered, rushing to check the security systems. "We have independent power supplies, triple redundancy." The main doors slid open with a hiss. 2 figures entered, a tall, elegant woman in expensive business attire, and a heavily augmented man whose cybernetic parts gleamed under the lab lights. "Impressive setup," the woman said, smiling coldly. "Much better than that little workshop where you first demonstrated your device." Lisa's hand moved to her weapon. "This is a restricted area." "How did you?" "Money opens many doors, my dear," the woman interrupted. "I represent certain interests who've invested heavily in the current balance of power. Your invention threatens that balance." The cybernetic man stepped forward, his artificial eyes scanning the lab. "The Galactic Weapons Accord has kept peace for 50 years. Energy weapons are carefully regulated, their power levels restricted. But your device? It makes those restrictions meaningless." "I'm not selling it to anyone," Lisa stated firmly. "The Academy." "The Academy is naive," the woman cut in. "They think they can contain this, study it safely. But the plans are already leaking out. Copies of your work are spreading. Unless..." She placed a small case on a nearby table. "This contains enough credits to buy a small planet. Take it. Retire somewhere peaceful. Let us handle the cleanup." Lisa's fingers tightened on her weapon. "And if I refuse?" The woman's smile remained pleasant, but her eyes hardened. "Then we do this the hard way. Your choice." In one smooth motion, Lisa activated her blade. The familiar hum filled the lab as brilliant energy blazed to life. Behind her, she heard Jack activating the lab's emergency protocols. "Fascinating design," the cybernetic man commented, his arms transforming into advanced weaponry. "But you're not the only one with impressive technology." The woman stepped back, still smiling. "Last chance, my dear. Don't force us to." Lisa's blade swept up in a defensive position. "You know what your biggest mistake was?" she asked calmly. "Thinking I spent these 3 weeks just making weapons." She pressed a hidden button on her workbench. Throughout the lab, dozens of small devices activated, each one containing a miniature version of her quantum core technology. "I've been upgrading everything," Lisa announced as energy fields sprang to life around the intruders. "Including our security systems." The energy fields pulsed with a soft blue glow, creating an impenetrable barrier around the 2 intruders. The cybernetic man fired his weapons, but the energy bolts dissipated harmlessly against Lisa's containment field. "Impossible," the woman hissed, her composed facade cracking. "Our intel said you only had the one working prototype." Lisa moved confidently around her workbench, her blade humming steadily. "You should have done better research." "The toy everyone laughed at? That was version 1. I'm up to version 12 now, and I've found some interesting new applications." The cybernetic man's scanners whirred as he analyzed the containment field. These aren't standard energy barriers. The quantum patterns are evolving. Adaptive containment fields, Lisa explained, allowing herself a small smile. They learn from every attack, getting stronger. The more you fight, the more impossible escape becomes. Jack worked at his console, coordinating with Academy security. Guards are 2 minutes out, Professor. And you'll want to see this, we're picking up signals from a cloaked ship in orbit. Looks like these two aren't alone. The woman's hand moved to her earpiece. Delta Team, execute emergency. Your backup isn't coming, Lisa interrupted. Those containment fields? I didn't just install them in the lab. There are hundreds of microgenerators hidden all over the Academy now. Your infiltration teams are probably having a very frustrating time right about now. As if confirming her words, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. On the lab's monitors, security feeds showed more energy fields activating in corridors and ventilation shafts, trapping dozens of hidden agents in mid-infiltration. You don't understand what you're doing, the woman said, her voice turning desperate. This technology, these applications, they'll destabilize everything. The weapons accords, the power balance between systems, the entire galactic economy. Lisa deactivated her blade, but kept it ready. No, you don't understand. I never wanted to create a weapon. I wanted to prove that human imagination could solve problems that the galaxy thought impossible. And now that I have. She gestured at the containment fields. These barriers can protect ships from asteroid impacts. They can contain radiation leaks in power plants. They can create safe zones in natural disasters. The quantum cores that power them can revolutionize energy production across the galaxy. And what about the weapons? The cybernetic man demanded. You can't control who builds them, who uses them. You're right, Lisa admitted. I can't. But I can make sure that for every weapon someone builds, there are 1,000 shields to stop it. That's what you're really afraid of, isn't it? Not that my invention will destabilize the galaxy, but that it will change who holds power in it. Academy security forces burst into the lab, weapons ready. Director Thomas followed them in, surveying the scene with obvious satisfaction. Well done, Professor, he said to Lisa. Though I must admit, when you requested permission to upgrade the Academy's security systems, I didn't expect quite this level of preparation. The woman glared at Thomas. The Council won't stand for this interference. We have agreements. We have proof, Thomas corrected her. Of your agent's infiltration, your attempted bribery, and the attacks on other research facilities. The Council will be very interested in that evidence. Along with your connection to certain weapons manufacturers who profit from maintaining the current restrictions. Lisa watched as security led the intruders away. Their capture would send shockwaves through the galaxy's power structures, but she knew this was just the beginning. Her invention wouldn't just change technology, it would change society itself. Director, she said, picking up the prototype she'd been working on. I think it's time we showed the galaxy what this technology can really do. Not as a weapon, but as something more. Thomas raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? Lisa smiled. How do you feel about revolutionizing space travel? 6 months after the lab incident, Lisa stood in the Academy's massive demonstration chamber. Through the reinforced windows, hundreds of representatives from across the galaxy watched intently. Her old energy blade hung at her side, but today's demonstration would show something far more impressive. The principles that powered my original invention, Lisa explained to the crowd, can be applied on a much larger scale. Today, we're going to show you how. She nodded to Jack, who stood at the chamber's control console. With a few commands, he activated their latest prototype. A massive quantum core hummed to life in the center of the chamber, surrounded by crystalline matrices that dwarfed Lisa's original designs. Current space travel relies on massive engines and expensive shielding, Lisa continued. Ships need separate systems for propulsion, defense, and environmental protection. But what if one system could do it all? The quantum core's energy built up, forming a visible sphere of pure power. The crowd murmured as the sphere expanded, its surface rippling with complex patterns of light. This is what we call a quantum envelope, Lisa announced proudly. A unified field that provides propulsion, shields, and life support all at once. With this technology, a ship could travel twice as fast while using half the power. More importantly, it makes space travel safer and more accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy. Excitement spread through the audience. Representatives from smaller worlds and poorer systems leaned forward eagerly. The ability to build better ships with fewer resources could change everything for their people. But not everyone looked pleased. Lisa noticed several corporate representatives whispering urgently into their communication devices. The major shipbuilding companies stood to lose fortunes if their expensive components became obsolete. Of course, a smooth voice called out, there are concerns about safety. About proper regulation. A well-dressed corporate executive stood up. The Galactic Transport Commission has strict standards. This technology would need years of testing before. Actually, Director Thomas interrupted, stepping forward, we've already completed safety testing. Over the past 6 months, we've run over 10,000 simulated flights and 50 real-world tests. The data has been verified by independent experts from 20 different worlds. Lisa activated a holographic display showing successful test flights. We didn't just make it work, we made it safe. And we're making all the research public. Every world, every system will have access to the complete designs. The corporate representatives looked horrified. One of them stood up angrily. You can't do that. The patents alone belong to the Academy, Thomas stated firmly. And we've decided that this technology is too important to be controlled by any one group. The plans are being transmitted across the Galactic network as we speak. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some representatives cheered while others protested loudly. Lisa watched it all with a mixture of pride and concern. She knew the fight wasn't over, the corporations would try legal challenges, tech companies would attempt to create restricted versions, and there would be more attempts to steal or suppress the technology. But none of that mattered now. The quantum envelope was out there, spreading across the galaxy. Soon, ships would be safer, faster, and more affordable. Space travel would no longer be a luxury for the rich or a risk for the desperate. Professor, Jack called out urgently. We're getting strange readings from the core. Lisa rushed to his console. The quantum envelope was fluctuating, its patterns becoming more complex. But these weren't error readings, they were something else entirely. The field, she whispered, watching the numbers change. It's not just containing energy. It's interacting with space itself. As the patterns shifted, Lisa's eyes widened with realization. Her original toy had led to the quantum envelope, but this was something even bigger. The reading suggested possibilities that made her previous breakthroughs look simple in comparison. She hadn't just changed space travel. She might have found a way to revolutionize their understanding of space itself. A week after the public demonstration, Lisa's lab had transformed into something entirely new. Holographic displays showed mind-bending calculations and simulations of twisted spacetime. The quantum core from the demonstration had been modified, its crystalline matrices rearranged into patterns that seemed to defy normal geometry. The data is clear, Lisa explained to Director Thomas and the emergency gathering of the Academy's top scientists. The quantum envelope doesn't just surround ships, it creates a bubble of altered space. That's why it allows faster travel. But we were thinking too small. She brought up a new simulation showing the complex energy patterns they'd discovered. The field doesn't just interact with space. It can fold it. The assembled scientists murmured in disbelief. An elderly physicist stepped forward, his voice trembling with excitement. Are you suggesting what I think you are? Lisa nodded. Controlled spacetime manipulation. Not just moving through space faster, but creating temporary bridges between distant points. What some humans once called wormholes in our science fiction. Impossible, several voices called out. But these protests lacked their former mockery. After everything Lisa had achieved, no one dared dismiss her claims entirely. 6 months ago, you said the quantum envelope was impossible, Lisa reminded them. A year ago, you laughed at my toy energy blade. How many times does the impossible have to become possible before we stop using that word? Director Thomas studied the calculations carefully. The power requirements would be enormous. The computational complexity alone would require. We already have the power, Lisa interrupted, gesturing at the modified quantum core. And as for calculations? She smiled. Well, humans have been imagining how to solve these problems for centuries. Sometimes the hardest part isn't finding the answer, it's knowing the right questions to ask. She activated the core. The lab's lights dimmed as power flowed into the modified quantum envelope. But instead of expanding outward, the field curved in on itself, creating patterns that hurt the eyes to look at. We're starting small, Lisa explained. A microfold in space, just a few molecules wide. But if it works. The core hummed louder. Monitoring equipment showed readings that made senior scientists step back in shock. In the center of the field, space itself began to pucker and fold. Jack called out readings from his station. Quantum stability at 97%. Field integrity holding. Spacetime curvature reaching critical threshold. A small light appeared in the field. Then, impossibly, the same light appeared 2 meters away. When Lisa passed her hand through one light beam, its shadow appeared in both locations simultaneously. The lab erupted in chaos. Scientists rushed to check readings, confirm measurements, and start documenting everything. But Lisa wasn't finished. The fold is stable, she announced. Now, watch this. She took out her original energy blade, the toy that had started everything, and activated it near the field. The blade's energy interacted with the quantum envelope, causing the spacefold to grow larger. Within moments, it was big enough to pass small objects through. This is just the beginning, Lisa told the awestruck crowd. With refinement, we could create stable passages between star systems. Instant communication and transport across the galaxy. No more isolation for distant colonies. No more years-long journeys between worlds. The corporations will fight this too, Thomas warned. The shipping companies, the communication consortiums, they'll all try to stop it. Lisa shook her head. They can try. But like the quantum envelope, we're making all our research public. Right now, the plans and calculations are spreading across the galaxy. You can't stop an idea whose time has come. She looked around the lab, remembering how far she'd come from those days of mockery and doubt. Her toy hadn't just changed technology, it had changed how the galaxy saw human innovation and imagination. You know what the best part is? She asked, smiling at her gathered colleagues. Somewhere out there, another student is looking at our work and thinking, that's interesting, but what if we tried something even more impossible? The quantum core hummed steadily as stars became reachable, distances became crossable. And the impossible became just another problem waiting for someone stubborn enough to solve it. And in labs and workshops across the galaxy, humans and aliens alike began to dream bigger, reaching for new impossibilities to conquer. Because once someone shows you that barriers can be broken, the only real limit is your imagination.